This is a green screen, and it can be used to turn your imagination into reality, whether it's for a fake backdrop, special effects, or superimposing yourself on top of something else. But don't worry, because using a green screen is much easier than you think. And what I'm going to show you in this video is how to set up a budget-friendly green screen, some best practices for getting awesome results, and how to edit your footage so that it actually looks like it fits into the new scene. But first, onto the one question that's probably bugging your mind. Why green? Or sometimes blue? Could it not be pink, orange, purple, yellow, or even black? Well, when it comes to removing the colour of the screen in the edit, which we'll cover later on, green and blue are the easiest colours to remove without removing any skin tones. Also, green is mostly used for brighter scenes, where blue is mostly used for darker scenes. Now, the screen that I use is made from fabric, but you can go to your local home supply store and buy some other material like card, vinyl, wool or cotton. But you just want to make sure the material you use is as flat as possible so that you don't get uneven surfacing, which we'll get onto later. But the type of material that you use depends on the type of green screen setup that you're using. But just make sure the material that you use isn't shiny, because that could cause some lighting issues, which we'll cover in a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to put a link to the green screen that I'm using down below. Also, this might go without saying, but you want to avoid wearing the same colour as your screen, because you know, this will happen. But how much space do you need for a green screen? Well, I'm filming in a room that's 7 foot by 13 foot, and the screen itself is 5 foot by 6.5 foot, and it comes with a 5.1 foot by 6.5 foot stand, which allows me to move the screen around the room quite easily. But the size of the screen you need depends on what you're filming. If it's just you sat at your desk, then your screen only needs to be big enough to cover your body and your body movements. But if you're filming something where you're stood up, then the screen needs to be big enough to fit your body. But if your feet need to be in the shot, then you might want to consider a super long screen. But the screen I'm using can just about do that. So the room just needs to be big enough to fit the green screen, and the green screen just needs to be big enough to fit the subject. But before you start filming with your green screen, the first thing that I like to do is plan what's going behind the subject. If you wanted to use your screen to add a studio background, but your camera looks like this, then it'd look a little bit odd. So think about where your camera will be positioned, where the subject will be in relation to the scene you're putting them in, and the height and the angle of your camera so that your shot and background merge perfectly. But in case you've already done this and got a bad angle with your camera, don't worry, because there's a way to fix it and we'll cover it later on. But you might also want to think about whether you want multiple camera angles. In a previous video, I already knew which angles to have my cameras at because I'd already created the scenes beforehand, which helped make the shot fit into the scene. But knowing where the scene takes place and where you're dropping the subject into helps you decide on the colour, position and brightness of your lights. If your scene has lighting coming from the left or your right, then place your lights towards the left of your subject so that it looks like your subject fits into the scene. But lighting is the most important element to think about when it comes to filming with a green screen, and there are 3 types of lights to think about. Your key light is the main source of light in your video, and it's usually placed where the main source of light is coming from in the scene that you're dropping your subject into. Just because it's called a green screen and can be magically removed from any shot doesn't mean it has no weaknesses. When you light the subject, or in this case me, it's important that you don't cast shadows onto the green screen or make dark areas on your green screen either. The backlight is what separates the subject from the background. And your third light lights up the dark areas of your subject. This is called the fill light. When I edited a previous video, I had a really annoying issue when it came to keying out the green screen. This. There was an area on my screen that was brighter than the rest of the screen, which meant when it came to removing the green screen, this mark stayed there, and it took a little bit of work to get rid of. The mark was left by a light I was using to light up my green screen, but this caused uneven lighting across the screen. And if you want to make it easier for yourself when it comes to editing out the green screen, then you want to make sure that the lighting stays consistent so that you get a consistent shade of green. You could do this by adding another light behind the subject, but just make sure it doesn't create a brighter area on the green screen. Depending on the material of your screen, you might get some wrinkles or creases, and wrinkles and creases are a big issue, especially if you want to get even lighting, so I'd consider ironing the material so you can make it as flat as possible. Alright, I fancied a change of scenery for the next part. Or did I? Actually, where am I? Ta-da! No, seriously, I do need to change the scene for the next bit. You see, you might be using green screen to put yourself in a different location. I don't know, maybe your room's super messy and you don't want people to see it, or you don't want to go through the process of setting up your lighting and background every single time that you come to recording. But you can pretty much put yourself anywhere with green screen, even out of space. And there are some great online libraries that have a huge range of stock photos and videos that you could use as backdrops. Pexels is one that I like using, but you could use other platforms like Vecteezy. I like to find artists that take pictures of locations from multiple different angles. It allows me to be more creative with my shots and allows me to make the images come to life. I also cut out background and foreground elements of my images to give it a kind of three-dimensional space. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but I do like to think about where my shot is taking place before actually shooting the shot. I like to think about the camera angle, the characters and the objects that are going to be in the scene. Actually, when I'm filming with a green screen, I like to have a picture of that scene I'm going into on my computer screen so that I can just imagine myself going into that space. It's also useful to think about your shot and scene in a grid system, and there's a technique that many people in the creative industry use called the rule of thirds. If you imagine where you, your characters, objects and elements sit within those lines or boxes, it can make it easier for you to act as though you're actually interacting with them. But one issue you might come across when using a green screen is overspill. This is when the green from the green screen merges with the subject. One way you could stop this from happening is by giving your subject really sharp edges and reducing motion blur. You know when a camera takes a photo? It happens by opening its lens and exposing the image sensor to light for a period of time. Well, a video camera works the same, but it's taking multiple photos over the length of a second. FPS stands for frames per second, and that's just the amount of frames that are taken within 1 second. By increasing the shutter speed or the frame rate, it can make the subject have sharper edges. So basically, the sharper the image is and the less blur that the subject has means there's less chance of the green screen overspilling onto the subject. But if you're using an iPhone to shoot your video, then you can change this in your settings. Other phones will have similar settings too. Let's dive into DaVinci Resolve, which is a free video editing software, and it's actually my favourite after using like 15 different video editors over my 16 years of video editing. 16 years of... wow, okay, well that's a long time. Even right back to the days of using Windows Movie Maker. Those were the days. No. DaVinci Resolve is way better. Let's begin editing some green screen footage. Now I've got some footage already that we can use, but what we're going to do is look at how to remove the green and how to make sure the footage that you recorded with the green screen fits into the background that you're adding in. So if we drop our background onto the bottom layer and our green screen footage onto the layer above, you can only see the green screen footage. But as soon as we cut a shape into our green screen footage by keying out the green, you'll see the background appear exactly where we cut out the green. But there are a few ways you can key out the green using DaVinci Resolve. Fusion is basically where you can add any visual effects to your footage, but we'll add something called a node onto this connecting line. And the node we'll use is called a delta keyer. This allows us to remove any colour from our footage, but we're obviously going to use it to remove the green. It's best to choose the colour closest to the subject because we want to make sure that the green closest to the subject is removed as a priority. But what if your keyed footage and your background footage kind of just looked weird together? Well, there is something that can help make your keyed footage and your background footage look as though they're filmed with the same camera. These two tools right here are called the yaw and pitch tool. It basically allows you to change the keyed footage and the background footage in 3D. And you basically adjust the two until they look good together. But my preferred and more reliable way of removing the green is by using the colour correction tab. So we'll select the keyed footage and go to the colour correction tab. We'll create a new serial node. We'll create a keyed node. And in this keyed node, we're basically going to tell DaVinci Resolve which colours we want removing from our footage by drawing on it. So we're going to draw on the green. Then we add an alpha output, connect the two blue dots, and invert the footage. But if our keyed footage is placed on a background where the colour and lighting don't match, then we've got a bit of an issue. Fortunately, there are a few cool hacks you can use to make your keyed footage match with any background. First, we'll match the colour. I'm basically looking at how bold or saturated the colours are in the background compared to the keyed footage, and I want to match the two. Then I'll do the same with the lighting. Now the two footages are looking like they're both from the same kind of shot. Now I'm pretty happy with the result, but I think there's something else that we can do to make the new background seem more realistic. In static shots, I always like to add some movement to make the shot more interesting. When I'm saying something important that I want you to listen to, I'll slowly zoom in on my face so that I grab your attention, or sometimes I'll make the camera shake to add a bit of visual interest, obviously not too much that it makes you feel weird. But the last thing we can do to make it seem more realistic is by adding a bit of blur to the background. I'll do this by adding some Gaussian blur, which is a preset within DaVinci Resolve. Now this just helps the keyed footage to stand out against the background footage, and it also helps to add some realistic focus to the shot. In fact, I want to give a shout out to Abby, who left this awesome comment on my last video, where every single shot was made using a green screen. Using a green screen in your videos is a great way to stand out from the crowd, but there's multiple things you need to think about before even creating your videos, whether you're using a green screen or not, so that you can get the best results possible. So watch this video right here where you'll meet someone called Guy, and you can help me help him make his first YouTube video by showing him everything that he needs to think about before hitting record so that he can get the best results possible.